Hey, everybody. So for Standard 2B, we are going to take a little closer look at that third leg of the triangular trade system. If you look up on the right-hand side in the map, which we refer to as the Middle Passage. And that is the part of the triangular trade where they would trade manufactured goods for slaves, right? And put the slaves on ships and sail them to the colonies. So we're going to talk about that Middle Passage. And I just want you to take a look at this picture. Actually, all of the pictures here on the slide. The one on the top left is an example of what it would be like in the hold of a ship, how they packed the slaves for the Middle Passage and why it was so horrific, right? Obviously, nothing was done for sanitation or, you can imagine the air and the heat. And if somebody got sick, there was, nothing there, just deplorable conditions. And then the one on the right is actually an underwater sculpture around the country of Grenada that sort of memorializes the African slaves who jumped or were forced overboard during the Middle Passage. A lot of times, if slaves became sick, because you got to think this cargo of slaves was money to these slave traders. So if someone got sick and was spreading it to the other slaves and making them sick, that slave became a liability. So many times they would throw overboard the sick slaves to preserve the rest of the cargo. And so this sculpture sort of memorializes those slaves that lost their lives during the Middle Passage. And then just the artwork at the bottom, I thought was really an emotional piece I just wanted to share with you. All right. So one of the things that, and I don't know, and I know the screen is not catching all of it, so I will obviously be sharing this in class, but there was something written, and you may read about it in your English class, about the travels, the life of Equiano, who was a slave that endured the Middle Passage. I know you're not seeing the whole screen. I apologize for that. It just would not get everything. But it just is a description that he gives in his narrative about what it was like in the hold of the ship during the Middle Passage. If you want to take a minute to read that, you can pause this. And also, I'm going to be sharing that link on our Canvas page where I am actually reading this for you. So you can go back and look at it there as well. Wanted you to take a look at this chart. When we talk about the slaves that came from Africa to the colonies, a lot of times we just think the African slaves are African slaves, right? But you've got to remember, Africa is made up of hundreds of little countries, right, within it. And those African tribes all speak different languages. They have different customs. They bring different traditions. And so this pie chart that you're looking at is it's actually showing you the different origins of all the slaves in one cargo on a ship arriving in South Carolina between 1732 to 1774. So as you can see on this chart, just because these are all African slaves, look at all the different places that they come from. And all of these slaves are bringing their own traditions and languages and customs and beliefs with them to the colony. So you can imagine how diverse that is going to become just on one plantation, right? Let's think about one plantation and all the different places that those slaves could have come from. And they're all coming together and trying to communicate and get along and do everything. So lots and lots of cultural diversity, even among the slave population. This is just an example of what might have been looked at when slave purchasers were looking at which slaves they wanted to buy by ethnic preference. Okay, so when you go back and you look at that pie chart previously and you see all the places they come from, different regions were known for having different kinds of slaves. Okay, so if you stop this and read through it, look at the fact that they say that the Angola men were large, okay? Or the Mandigos are superior in intelligence. The Papums and the Weedas are docile and weak, right? The Gaboon Africans are said to be ill disposed. Maybe that means they get sick a lot, or they're kind of temperamental, or whatever it was. But even the people that were purchasing the slaves knew that depending upon the area they come from, they sort of got a reputation. I found that very, very interesting. And then just an immigration by ethnic group of the 13 colonies between 1700 to 1775. Not only do you see the different cultural diversity among the white Europeans, but also you can see how many Africans were the population increases over 75 years, right? We have 9,000 Africans in the colonies at 1700. And by 1770, you have almost 18,000 that are coming in, for a total of, by that time, almost 280,000 slaves. There is a really neat, it's sort of a progression that shows the history of the American slaves. It's an interactive map. I will try to share that link in class, but that's what you're seeing at the bottom. It shows where all of these slaves go and how the population increases as time goes by. The other thing I wanted to share with you was, how we talked about all these different African tribes coming over as slaves, all the things that they bring over, their traditions and things that they know how to do. So things like okra, which I love me some okra. Okra, yams or sweet potatoes, rice, basket weaving like the gullahs that were prevalent in South Carolina, African music, the shotgun house, those long skinny houses. Those were all cultural contributions from African slaves that came over that are still prevalent in our society today, right? You can't go to Charleston and walk through the market without buying a Gullah handmade basket, or you can't go to New Orleans and take a tour of all the old homes without seeing these shotgun homes. So, and everybody makes sweet potato casserole at Thanksgiving. So the cultural contributions of African slaves to our society that are still prevalent today are just many, many.